is I'm concerned that if I share my screen to show the presentation, you all will disappear and we will be unable to do sign language interpretation. So I would suggest you open the slideshow in a different browser. It is less than ideal, sorry, but I don't want
to. Can we try to share the screen? Is that?
I'll give it a shot.
Can we just give it a shot?
Yeah, absolutely.
That'd be great. Yeah, we didn't lose everybody. I got everybody.
All right. Sorry, I'm just going to try and. Can everyone still see who they need to see?
I can see Rico, so I guess that's okay.
Okay, if you enlarge the square of people, you can see more people. Right. Interpreters, are we good?
Rico? Rico, can you see me? You can see me. Beautiful. Thank you so much for everyone's patience. We are good to go. Thank you.
Colin?
John, anything you need before we start?
I don't think so. Harvey, we're streaming?
Yes, we're streaming now.
Okay.
All right. Well, welcome everyone to the first Writers Advisory Council meeting since the before time. I think we've got a few formal items on the agenda, but before we dive in, we do need to both approve the agenda and our minutes from our March meeting. Looks like we've got public comment up ahead of that. So do we have any members of the public who want to make a comment?
Colin, we did have the comment by email. It came in this afternoon.
Do you happen to have that pulled up?
I certainly do.
So would you mind to just share that with the group?
Not at all. There we go. This is from Adriana. Forgive me if you're watching for butchering your last name. Radulescu, excuse me. Adriana writes, I'm not clear on what WMATA's plans are, and I oppose the bus cuts for the same reason I have opposed them since December 2019. The pandemic should not be used as an excuse to do away with public transportation, especially in areas underserved by it to begin with. So
sorry to interrupt you, Andrew. Rico, can you see me? He seems to be responding when I speak and sign, but not when I sign only. I don't know if he can actually, can you see me, Rico? While you can see the panel, the slideshow, you can see both? Okay. So Andrew, can you give some instructions about how to look at or pin the interpreter and the PowerPoint, please?
Actually, Mary Beth, this is Phil.
Phil, before you start, please, I need everyone to please manually mute their video except for whoever is speaking.
Right.
There is a female voice that I hear right now, and I can't hear whoever is talking.
Mary Beth, if I could just suggest, if you are,
Brittany, will you please interpret while we're figuring this out?
Rico can pin you.
Yes.
If he goes to YouTube, you can see the presentation and you in the corner on YouTube very well. And in the other window where he has signed on to the regular meeting.
Right, but we're not using YouTube right now. We're using WebEx.
Right, I understand that.
Communicate with each other, right?
But if you go to both, basically I'm on WebEx and then I open the YouTube so that I can see Rico really well. I can see you really well on YouTube. And I've got the agenda up on WebEx. If you do it the other way, you can do the agenda on WebEx and see you and Rico on YouTube. So if you use two windows, then you can do that.
I think he's using his telephone, Phil, and I think that's what the issue is. Rico, Rico, are you using your telephone?
Hey, Mary.
Okay. So it means
Mary
you are
Beth.
using your telephone. You can't see both the PowerPoint and the interpreter, right? Right. So you will have to pick. Andrew, correct me if I'm wrong. If you're using your phone, you have to pick which one you want to look at. Is that right?
I'm the wrong person to ask. I've never used WebEx
Okay.
on my phone.
Okay, this is Harvey speaking. Mary Beth, and what's the gentleman name? That's Dancy. Rico. No, not Dancy. Who was I'm sorry, everyone.
Rico, you're right. You're right. Keep going.
Okay,
Yeah.
Rico. Okay, Rico. If you can actually go up to Mary Beth when you see her, and right-click her, and then select. Actually, left-click her and then select the little pin. And if you click that, then that'll lock her in on your screen, and you will always see her at the top. She won't be able to go anywhere. Now, and Mary Beth, if you do the same thing, then Rico won't disappear either while you guys are signing. And then when you hand off, then we just have to switch it over to the next individual, next interpreter.
I appreciate, Harvey, what you're trying to say, but again, I'm going to just repeat. He is using his phone. He is not accessing us through a computer. And so he's only able to see one screen at a time.
This is Brittany, the other interpreter. I've tried to pin Rico, and it keeps him small, even though I've pinned him, and that was before we did the screen share. Normally, whenever you pin, it will make them big, but it's not working. And when you did the screen share, you can set it up so that way, if you're on a computer, you can set it up so you have the slides, and then you have a little bit bigger picture of who you've pinned, but that doesn't seem to be working either. So I'm not sure how to make it so we can keep Rico and the interpreters to see each other.
So this is Mary Beth Morgan. It may be that we have to become host as well, or co-host. But I have it set in the middle setting, where it's a side-by-side view. There's 3 different choices, and I picked the middle one. And Brittany is bigger than everyone else, but I've pinned Rico, and he's not able to be pinned. And so
that's what I've also done. Whoever is speaking for some reason becomes the bigger, that middle-sized picture, when it should just be Rico because we've pinned him, but it's not working.
I know that just as information, I know that for WMATA, we've been using Zoom for other stuff in WMATA, but the board I know has been using WebEx. So however we need to proceed to support Rico, I'm happy to do. Does anybody have any other options?
Mary Beth, maybe you and I'm sorry, Brittany could start a separate WebEx meeting directly with Rico, and then everyone could follow along on the YouTube.
I'll let Brittany start a separate WebEx for us, and then invite Rico. Rico, do you want to be invited through email? Brittany, do you have Rico's email?
No, Rico, would you mind messaging me through WebEx your email, and I will send you an invite.
You see where?
Brittany, I have it.
You have it? Okay, that'd be great if you could just send it to me.
So Rico, do you understand what we're doing? We're going to separate our WebEx, so it's just us three, okay? Okay. Thank you all for your patience. We will figure it out.
John, basically, you can send me and Laura the invite.
Okay, Rico, if you can see me, I don't know if you can or not, but please look at your email. Click the new WebEx link from Brittany. No idea if he saw that or not. I don't see him. See Brittany, that on. Thank you all for your patience. He looks like he's not in this meeting anymore. Okay, so I'm going to switch. Thank you all for your patience.
Yeah, he's connecting to my meeting room now.
Okay, I'm going to switch over. Thanks, Brittany.
Mm-hmm.
Leave event.
Okay, I have, this is Brittany. I have Nico here. So while Mary Beth is logging in, if you want to go ahead and get started, I can start interpreting for him.
Great. Thank you. And apologies, Rico, for making this so difficult for you to join. I hope in the future we can avoid that.
Yes.
I'm thinking maybe using Zoom would be better. It seems there's less problems with Zoom. I don't know what you guys think.
All right. So at the outset of the meeting, it sounded like there was another member of the public who had called in. So I just want to make sure that if we do have other members of the public who want to make a comment, that we give them the opportunity.
Yes, I'd like to. Hello.
Yep. Can you state your name and then go ahead with your comment?
This is Tino Calabria of the Accessibility Advisory Committee. Can you hear me?
Tino. Yep, we can hear you.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to make sure that I could hear you. Well, I'm on the phone, so I don't have anything to comment. I just want to make sure there was two-way connection. Thank you.
Got it. No problem. All right, well, if there aren't any additional comments from members of the public, I'm going to move this along. Do I have a motion for approval of the minutes from our March meeting?
Well, I'll second it.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Great.
Hearing none. Okay, and swinging to the agenda for tonight.
A motion to approve the agenda. Actually, wait, Colin, are we gonna do elections or not?
That's a great question. I honestly don't know if we're going to have time tonight.
Yeah.
Happy to entertain a friendly amendment to the agenda if we do have time.
I'll move that if we do have time, we move on to elections.
All right. Anyone opposed to that? Hearing none. All right, I'm going to assume that is an approval of our agenda. All right, so the first order of official business that we have is an update from WMATA staff on WMATA's COVID-19 recovery plan. Just a reminder to folks, if you're not speaking, please do mute yourself. I'm hearing some background noise.
Okay, good evening, everyone. My name is Laura Mason. I'm the Executive Vice President of Capital Delivery, focused primarily on our capital program. I've been supporting our General Manager, Paul Wiedefeld, and our Chief Safety Officer, Teresa Impestado, with the recovery plan. And tonight, what I'll walk you through is our recovery planning that we have done. This is the presentation that was also presented in front of the full board on May 14th. And that video is still available if you'd like to hear the dialogue that the board engaged in and the questions they asked. At a high level, our goals are to support the region's managed reentry, earn public trust that bus and rail travel is safe, to effectively communicate changing service and fare plans as they evolve. The service restoration strategy is really based on three principles. First and foremost is to protect our employees, because without them, we cannot deliver any service. Second is to protect our customers, and we do that by providing service that enables safe social distancing. And our third principle is to try to stay ahead of demand until a vaccine or herd immunity makes social distancing unnecessary. As we'll get into in the presentation, it is difficult to impossible to maintain or enforce social distancing within mass transit. So we'll be continuously monitoring crowding and doing the best we can to maximize the service that we can deliver safely and reliably. Next slide. So this data is a little bit out of date at this point. We were supposed to present this previously, but the COVID-19 recovery and restoration, I believe many of you are watching the various news outlets. I think what I can say this time is that there are multiple models with a broad range of outcomes. When we were looking at our recovery plans, there was about a 75-day range for when the National Capital Region would peak. And there's still a risk of second waves or outbreaks of cases, as we've seen in other countries. There's many parallel paths being pursued across the country to alleviate supply chain shortages, to increase hospital capacity, and to develop treatments and vaccines. And really, restoration of service depends on all of the above, none of which is within our control. What we are trying to do is predict when the region will be ready and provide the service that they need. If you're not speaking, can you please go on mute? I am also hearing some feedback.
Pat, can you mute yourself?
Yeah, I'll do it. I thought I was muted. Sorry.
Thank you. Next slide, please, John. We want to just touch on what we're doing to protect our employees. We're focused on reducing their exposure risk through role-based risk assessments. What that means is we look at each of our essential employees to understand how we can make them safer, where exactly is their exposure risk and what we can do to change it, focusing first on engineering controls, things that we can install or do to partition workspaces and separate people. This particularly includes the move to rear door boarding on buses. We've also looked at administrative controls, the things changing the way in which people work, which is primarily modifying their work schedules to reduce the occupancy of facilities, to reduce team sizes, and to change how we work to accommodate social distancing during the course of their duties. And then finally, we're emphasizing individual actions that each person can take, which is primarily hand hygiene. We're making more mobile hand washing stations available, as well as face coverings and PPE as warranted by the task. And with that, we continue to monitor closely our quarantine and case rate to understand our workforce availability and the transmission we're seeing within our own employee community. Next slide. We're also focusing on protecting our customers, and we did that through comprehensive operational safety assessments. The engineering controls we implemented to protect our customers include increased cleaning and disinfection practices, particularly focused on high-touch areas, implementing administrative controls such as changing our wayfinding guides and how people interact with our system, trying to reduce the amount to which they need to interact with people, looking at our fare card in particular. And then for customers, also encouraging them with good hand hygiene and face coverings. We have made it mandatory to cover your face while riding our buses and trains, and that went into effect a few weeks ago. At the end of all of this, so what I think is important for people to understand is that social distancing effectively cuts the capacity of our service by 80%. Meaning, if we could previously fit 100, 120 people in a rail car, we can now fit something in the low 20s. And that means that it would take 5 times the number of vehicles to carry the same number of people that we used to carry pre-COVID. So we're going to monitor crowding conditions, but for as long as social distancing is being recommended by the CDC, our capacity will be reduced. So we want to communicate to the jurisdictions and to the employers of the region to encourage them to continue remote work to the extent that it's feasible for them. We've done a lot of work to align with the region and understand how the different jurisdictions are moving from response to recovery. Across the district, Maryland and Virginia, there is a consistency in the phased approach, even though the different jurisdictions may enter those phases at different times. They're using similar data sets and similar gates. And there's consistent factors characterizing each of those phases. So we look at this as a flexible roadmap rather than a strict timetable, recognizing that each of the different counties may experience COVID in different ways and at different rates. We've also been working closely with the federal government, with OMB and OPM, on their guidance for the federal workforce so they understand our limitations and can communicate that effectively within their various offices. Next slide. What it comes down to is that we're really looking at a multi-phase approach. Crisis response was where we were back in March timeframe when this became suddenly a large impact for the district, Maryland and Virginia, and stay-at-home orders went into effect. We are now in the stabilization period. We are seeing stay-at-home orders being relaxed or lifted. We're still protecting employees. We're asking customers to protect themselves and still focused on delivering trips for essential employment and asking people to not ride for non-essential trips. What we're looking at is when do we think we'll enter the managed reentry phase. This is when schools reopen, when employers start scaling back on telework and the office workforce starts to return. What we want to provide is mobility that can still enable safe social distancing. After managed reentry will be the recovery phase. We denote this as when we think the vaccine or treatments would be widely available and we'd see a significant influx of economic activity and transportation needs. And finally, resilience is our post-pandemic. How will our behavior patterns change for the long term? We still don't know what lingering behavioral changes we will see in our community, but we know we want to take the lessons from COVID-19 to incorporate them into our service models to make us more resilient in the future. Next slide. We want to touch briefly on anticipating customer behavior. We've been doing a significant amount of customer research over the last 3 months to inform our planning. We've done rider focus groups to discuss their concerns, preferences, and to understand how they get information about our service. We're learning about their current and future travel choices and what are the decision triggers they are looking for. We've also polled employers to understand how they will be planning for their workforce changes. And as I said before, collaborating with the federal workforce. Next slide. The survey we conducted back in mid-April showed that most customers believe that Metro is handling the health crisis well. There's a positive sentiment, and most importantly, towards our frontline essential workers. People appreciated our operators and other essential workers who were putting themselves out each day to deliver service. They did note that they perceived Metro travel as riskier than grocery shopping, due in part to the inability to social distance and enforce that. One of the changes we did notice is that customers now want to see cleaning and disinfecting to be visible and frequent. These are activities that previously we carried out during our non-service hours overnight. And what we're hearing from customers is they want us to move that to the daytime so they can see it and be assured that it's happening. And as of April, 90% of the individuals surveyed still had no information from their employers on future telework plans. We will be updating this in the near future for our board, but we are still seeing a significant amount of riders surveyed do not have information yet on when they will return to their office environments. Next slide. The communication strategy really has multiple components to it. We focus on our internal employee communications, so our employees understand what is required of them to keep themselves safe as well as keeping our customers safe. We are looking at our stakeholder communications to make sure our stakeholders understand changes to health and safety protocols, to understand the CARES Act and funding and what that means for the jurisdictions, as well as the changes we've made to the FY21 budget. We're also focusing on customer communications, keeping them up to date in real time with how their experience may change. We've had station closures and other updates to make sure they knew what service was being offered. And in the future, we will look to marketing and a welcome back or phased information campaign. And when we think we have the capacity, we will look at whether or not we need to incorporate incentives or new flexible passes that assume more telework as a permanent behavioral change. We are also advancing our contactless mobile fare payment system as a way to address some concerns and decrease the amount of touch points we have within the system. Next slide. I'm sure many have heard Dr. Fauci use the expression, this is not a light switch. We are not a light switch. We are a large 12,000 plus person organization. What's most important to understand is that the lights need to be on before people enter the room. We acknowledge that ridership will be unpredictable in the next 18 months. So we are focused on delivering service ahead of demand to allow ridership to grow until a vaccine or herd immunity makes social distancing unnecessary. It is quite difficult for us to increase it. So we are, rather than trying to map to each one of these 5 phases, we're looking at taking 3 big steps to increase service. And with that, I will turn it over to Joe Leader, our Chief Operating Officer, to talk through what that means from an operations perspective. Joe, are you still with us?
I don't see his name on the list of participants.
I'll carry on then. Maybe Joe lost internet. I know he's had some challenges, so perhaps he will rejoin us shortly. He was on earlier. All right. I will try and speak to his slides then. Next slide, please. Increasing service requires a significant amount of advanced work. It takes about 3 months to implement a new service plan. And that's because a service plan requires developing bus and rail schedules and then aligning them for connections between modes. We collaborate extensively with the jurisdictions to coordinate connections to other services. And then we program fares into those systems that drive online transactions. And all of this has to be done before we can have 4,000 employees select new assignments from the schedule based on their seniority in accordance with our collective bargaining agreements. Once we have that done, we also adjust our inspection and maintenance regimes to make sure we're ready for the increased service, and then produce and install updated signage in stations and onboard trains and buses. What we've been focused on in the last few months is to take 3 big steps in order to reduce the amount of advanced work required. We're going to pre-plan our levels of service to enable us to reduce that implementation time by a month so that we can make the decision 2 months out rather than 3+ months out. What we've done in May was to implement the stabilization service pattern. Pardon me. I was trying to get back on. We have implemented the stabilization service pattern now, and this maintains or improves the service we have been offering since March. But what it does, it makes it a lot more sustainable for our workforce and prepares us in case there is an increase in case rate over the months of May and June. One key point is that the changes that were approved as part of the original FY21 budget were deferred in the stabilization pattern rather than choosing to implement them on July 1st, because that would have triggered all of the above described steps. Next slide. So we're looking at stepping up service in 3 levels, and we've dubbed them stabilization, managed reentry, and recovery, in line with those phases that I addressed earlier. What they're based on is differences in workforce availability and CDC guidelines for social distancing, as well as some other challenges. So the stabilization was built on low availability, assuming that social distancing was required per CDC guidelines, and the need to reestablish accurate rider planning tools, i.e. our bus ETA systems, and start mitigating the delays we were experiencing to our capital program. We started implementing that in May. We expect that to be in place through much of the summer. Managed reentry is where we think we'll have moderate workforce availability, meaning more than 80% available. We expect that CDC will still be encouraging social distancing, but you see people beginning to back off from that as a requirement. And we are looking at what that means for our capital program if there's any infrastructure stimulus money available from the federal government. We don't control the timing of this. It depends on many other factors. What we were projecting is that we think managed reentry would happen in mid-August to October timeframe, but that we need a 2-month lead time. So we need to decide by the end of June what service we want to run in August. And the dates shown on here are only tentative. They will definitely be based on the regional readiness and close collaboration with the jurisdictions. Next slide. At a high level, I want to touch on what the rail service looks like, what service looks like for both rail and bus in these 3 phases. So in the stabilization phase for rail, we're looking at approximately 20-minute headways, a span of service that is from 5 a.m. to 9 p.m. on weekdays, 8 a.m. to 9 p.m. on weekends. And we have shut down all the stations west of Ballston for our platform renewal program. Cars 1 and 8 had previously been closed as a mitigation and protection for our operators, and those have been reopened as of last week. Managed reentry, again, we estimate this will start sometime between mid-August and October. We would look to double the capacity and run approximately 10-minute headways, and the span of service we've been contemplating is essentially the same as what we have been running in stabilization, but restoring the additional hour earlier on Saturday morning. And all stations will open, though it depends on the timing of the platform program completion for the stations west of Ballston. Recovery, this is tentative. We believe this is likely a spring 2021. We would enter the service pattern. This is where we start to see the AM and PM peak service emerging, and that the evenings would be reviving. And service would be near pre-pandemic levels, again, with peak service and a span service hours, approximately 5 a.m. to midnight. Next slide. On the bus side, stabilization, this implementation is in progress, and we have shifted resources and operators to address some of the crowding conditions we saw in April and May. It is Sunday-like headways with some adjustments based on the ridership we've seen, and Sunday-only routes operated with less service on the weekends. The span of hours is 4 a.m. to 11 p.m., and we are using rear door boarding with the front of the bus isolated. Managed reentry. So again, this fall, we're looking to see all or more routes operating, perhaps at less frequent service, and a reduction in our extra peak or limited stop service so that we can focus on providing local service and serving all stops. Likelihood is that our span of hours would remain the same, 4 a.m. to midnight, and we do anticipate to continue rear door boarding, as we expect social distancing to still be highly desirable and encouraged by the CDC. In the recovery plan, so in spring 2021, is when we think we'd see full resumption of service with all routes operating over a normal time span, and that we would resume front door boarding. Next slide. So in addition to our operations, we have been closely monitoring and mitigating the delays to the capital program. Construction was considered or is considered essential by all of the jurisdictions, as well as under the DHS guidelines. So we have implemented new safety protocols in compliance with the CDC guidance, focused on hand and tool washing and additional PPE. We have been constrained by the availability of operations personnel to support our work. We have also started to see, depending on the project, other potential impacts, including productivity losses and supply chain delays. In order to mitigate the delays to our capital program, and in some cases accelerate work while ridership is down, we made 2 key choices, and that was to enlarge the summer shutdown for the platform improvement project to be all stations west of Ballston, and to start localized short duration shutdowns to enable the state of good repair work elsewhere on the system. Next slide. So I'm sure this is now familiar for many of you. We have expanded the summer shutdown to be all stations west of Ballston. This went into effect on Saturday, May 23rd, and all train service begins and ends at Ballston MU Station, and there is no Silver Line service. Next slide. These are the shuttle buses. All the stations that were previously open, but excluding Greensboro and McLean, do have shuttle buses operating from them. Shuttle hours and frequency are as shown on the slides, approximately every 10 minutes on weekdays between 5 a.m. and 9 p.m. and approximately every 15 minutes on weekends between 8 a.m. and 9 p.m. Next slide. platform project has made significant progress. The numbers you see here are from mid-May, before the outage has begun. And I can tell you that they have gotten off to a very strong start with over 120 people on site each day across 4 stations and 2 shifts. And they're making very good work. And the project is progressing well and stayed on schedule. Next slide. So the localized shutdowns. The high-level concept is that during the stabilization phase, we would like to use short duration shutdowns to execute capital work 24/7. We will focus on one location at a time, spending 1 to 2 weeks in each location. The locations will be announced mid-month for the following month's work. We will execute this on a rolling basis, trying to make up for lost time and lost resources due to COVID. From a service perspective, we will maintain the same rail service we were providing elsewhere on the system, and a bus bridge will always be provided across the closure area. Next slide. So the June track work plan is as shown on the screen. For this week, started actually on June 8th to the 13th. We have a work zone between L'Enfant Plaza and Pentagon, so there is no yellow line service north of National Airport. Starting this coming weekend on June 14th and lasting through June 20th, we will be closing Navy Yard and Waterfront stations, as we have a work zone set up between L'Enfant Plaza and Anacostia and Pentagon. And there will continue to be no yellow line service north of National Airport. The following week, on June 21st to the 27th, L'Enfant Plaza to Shaw, Howard, and Pentagon will be our work zone. We will close Archives, the lower level of Gallery Place, Chinatown, and Mount Vernon Convention Center stations. And again, for the 3rd week, no yellow line service north of National Airport. And our last planned event for June is June 28th to July 12th, although I did not catch this has been shortened to end on July 3rd. It will be U Street to Fort Totten, and the closed stations will be Columbia Heights and Georgia Avenue. I do want to highlight that at any time you can go to WMATA.com to get the most updated details on the outages, the dates, and the locations, as well as the locations of the bus bridges. Next slide. So in addition to everything we are doing to protect our workforce and to serve our customers, we're also planning for our own managed reentry, looking at all of the various aspects you see before you. For our customers, we're looking at the public safety issues, the visible cleanliness of Metro, and the ability to enable them to maintain social distancing as much as they can, and to develop a contactless rider experience. On our workforce side, we are looking at our remote work policy and how to ensure productivity and accountability during this period of extensive remote work, and also promoting our employee wellness programs to ensure the health and welfare of all of our employees. We continue to look at our work schedules to come up with alternatives to enable us to better serve this region while protecting our employees. On the capital side, we are closely monitoring supply chain and procurement issues to make sure we have enough materials to sustain our disinfecting and cleaning functions, and to enable the safety of our capital projects, knowing that safety is a long-term investment and we need to maintain our progress on the capital program in order to deliver safe and reliable service in a post-COVID world. Operationally, we're looking at safe and efficient operations and understanding the new mobility landscape, understanding what our rider and non-rider travel behaviors are in order to support our operating decisions. And financially, we're paying close attention to our budget and to all available funding opportunities to make up for our lost revenues. All told, we are trying to adapt to the present while building a more resilient future. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Laura, and thanks for being willing to pivot and take on 2 presentations. So I know there's a lot of information, and before I hand it over to folks for any questions or comments, Laura, can you tell us sort of how WMATA's plan for post, or I guess during and post COVID-19 compares to like other major metropolitan areas transit systems I mean, I guess to the degree that you have that information.
Sure, and I do see Joe is back on, so I'll start, but let him jump in if he would like to. We are paying close attention to what our peers are doing elsewhere in the US, as well as in Europe and around the world. We've compared notes with them about how to protect our workforce, the mitigations to put in place. I'm proud to say that I believe Metro was ahead of the curve with a lot of our workforce mitigations, and that's enabled us to keep our workforce safer. We've had a lower infection rate and less severity, and I do believe that is in large part due to the quick action we took in March to implement those workforce mitigations. In terms of the managed reentry on the recovery side, we are paying close attention to what is going on in Europe, where they have been ahead of the US in terms of the infection and managed reentry curve, and learning from their experience in operating in this new environment, what riders expect to see, what they want, and what works well. So is there anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I apologize. I thought there was going to be another meeting request coming out, so I hung up. So I apologize. No, I heard the comments that you did on the slides that I was supposed to do. What I can tell you is my team is constantly working with COMAT and UITP with our international to see what's happening in North America as well as in Europe and Asia. And what we're learning is although most agencies in Europe and in Asia were thinking that they were going to be able to enforce social distancing, we're starting to find out that we're a transportation agency and that's against what we normally do. So I think, like Laura said originally, some of the decisions we made very early on, requiring masks, putting our workforce on A&B days to try and protect the workforce from the exposure and the risk that was out there, has really proven to be very good moves that we made. To think that we only had about 160 employees that had contacted COVID-19 since February, March. The fact that we've had no fatalities when it comes to our workforce. When you look at some of the agencies in North America and in Europe, they are fighting something much different. So I think we made very good choices. I'm not going to say that they were very easy choices to make. And we know that every choice we make does hurt the region in some cases. But I think we really try and force down ridership as quickly as possible. What we did was a good move. And I think what we're willing to do right now is, as the jurisdictions begin to open up, begin to look at what we can do. I think the most important thing, and I think Laura covered it, is we want to stay one step ahead of ridership demands. If ridership demands come back and are great, and we're not there yet, we're going to be in trouble. So we want to stay one step ahead when it comes to service, and that is what we're trying to do with the stabilization plan, the management entry plan, and of course the recovery plan. So we have a very good team that's working, and we're part of it. Using the recovery back in, how we're going to do it, not only as an agency, but also as a workforce. What we're going to do. So I think we have a great team, and I see somebody saying you have a hard time hearing me.
Yeah. I'm sorry, Joe, to interrupt you, but the audio is very muffled.
I apologize. I don't know what the problem is. Okay. I just wanted to say, I just want to reiterate some of the things that Laura said. I think we have made some great decisions early on to reduce the risk not only to our customers but also to our employees. That has paid off extremely well, and I'm just very happy. Although we still have a workforce that is sick, that is quarantined in some cases, compared to other agencies who are doing much better.
It looks like Rebecca has a question, and I'll scroll through the chat to see if other folks have put a question in there. But Rebecca, do you want to ask your question?
Sure. I didn't know how we were going to do questions. Can everyone hear me?
Loud and clear.
Okay. I was just curious if you could share who is going to be enforcing, quote unquote, the refusal to wear a mask policy against riders if someone cannot afford a mask or doesn't have a mask, or maybe they're trying to get to the store to buy a mask. So that's a question I have. Some transit entities have provided masks. Some cities, like Houston, have given masks away to individuals if they're found without a mask. So just curious about that. And then also if anyone can speak to the whether or not there's a contact tracing plan in place for your staff that's on the front lines. I'm not sure if Joe spoke to that. I couldn't really hear him. Thank you. I'm going back on mute.
I really hope you guys can hear me. Can you hear me now?
Joe, go ahead, and if we lose you again, I can jump in.
I can barely hear Joe. It's very muffled.
I apologize because I've not had this problem before, and we've used WebEx before, so I'm not too sure what's wrong with my tablet, if it's me. I will tell you that we want to make face coverings mandatory, but we don't want to enforce it in the sense of what happened at SEPTA, where we're dragging people off our buses or our rail system. I can tell you there is an executive task force or executive pandemic task force that myself and Laura are on, and we are working with our supply chain to see if there's a way that we can come up with a safe way to offer masks to our face coverings to our riders if they can't afford it or don't have them. Currently, right now, my police officers carry 2 or 3 in their pocket.
Hey, Joe. This is Brittany, one of the interpreters. We are also struggling. Is there any way that Laura could clarify? Because we can hear her clearly. I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm just wondering if that's something we could do.
Sure, I'll recap what Joe had said.
That's great. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I'm sorry, Joe.
So what Joe was saying is that we want all riders and all employees to be wearing face coverings while on our system. We want to avoid some of the conflict that we have seen at other transit properties over the enforcement of that. We are working closely within our executive response team for this pandemic that both Joe and I are on to look at distribution methods for how we can make masks available for those who don't have them, can't afford them, or for whatever reason do not have a mask on their person. At this time, we have equipped our police force, the Metropolitan Transit Police, to carry some additional masks so that if they see riders, they can offer a mask in order to de-escalate the situation.
Rico says thank you.
So I do have a question, it looks like maybe from a member of the public. Given that, at least for the time being, you're encouraging rear boarding on buses, are there plans to install smart trip card readers in near that rear door on any or all of the fleet?
Yes, that is something we have been looking at. That was actually an initiative we had started before COVID. We are accelerating it to install targets on the rear doors so that we can collect fares. At this time, we are working to see if that can be in place by this spring or summer of 2021, but we still have to evaluate whether or not we can complete the project, the programming, and actually acquire the devices and install them in time. So yes, we are working to get targets installed on the rear doors, but we do not see that happening within the next few months while we are continuing to do rear door boarding for the protection of our workforce.
Got it. Thank you. Looks like Yvette has a question. Yvette? Are you still with us?
If not, this is Tino.
Go ahead, Tino.
I think Ride On has installed a dispenser for face masks on their buses. Because of COVID, I haven't been on any transportation since mid-March, but I've seen pictures of the dispensers that apparently are on Ride On buses in Montgomery County. I can send them to you, Colin.
Yes, there has been. Can you hear me now, Joe? Leader?
Yes, that's better, Joe.
Okay. Yes, other agencies have installed. The concern with our safety department is you don't want to create something like a box where somebody sticks their hand in and is touching multiple masks. You want to be able to have the individual go to something like a napkin dispenser where you pull one mask at a time and don't contaminate the other mask. So we are currently, from a supply chain issue, looking to see if we could come up with some kind of dispensing system that we would be able to install at our rail stations and also on our buses.
Hi, this is Barbara. Question, please.
Sorry, who is it?
Barbara.
Barb. Okay, go ahead, Barbara.
Thank you so much. Metro folks, thank you so much for coming. It's a little late for you, I know. And I am visually impaired, representing a group of partially sighted people. What happens when we try to get on the bus and rail? We don't really know how many you guys can take a quick glance and see how many people are on the bus or rail and determine how to proceed from there. We don't want to sit on anybody, if you know what I mean. I'm wondering if there's going to be some kind of enforcement, or I don't want to use that word because I know it's kind of hard to do that, but how are we going to know? I mean, basically, are you guys going to be regulating how many people go into each car of the train so that you're not over the amount, because we want to be 6 feet apart, and if there's too many on there, that's negating the goal.
I think as was mentioned before, I think it's going to be very difficult for us to enforce any kind of social distancing on our buses and rail. I think the most important thing that we can do is communicate to our customers that it's very important that you continue to wash your hands, you continue to wear face coverings while you're on our system, and I think that's it. I kind of look back at a family, a mother with maybe 1, 2, 3 kids. Are they going to want to separate their kids 6 foot away from them? The answer is probably no. And I think it's going to be very difficult for us to do that in the future. And what we're hearing from our European counterparts and people from Asia, when they thought they could put those guidelines out and enforce it, they're realizing now they can't. And I think it's counterintuitive to what our transportation business is all about, is moving people. I can tell you, I was in the system this past weekend on Saturday during the demonstrations, and I can tell you, families were coming in and we're not socially distancing on the trains, and it's going to be very difficult for us to do.
So are you going to be like putting X's on the seats where we shouldn't be sitting?
The answer is no.
So it's up to the ridership to police all of that, if you will.
Correct.
Oh boy.
I go back to a family. You think a mother or father would? I have 3 kids. If I would go on to the system myself, would I spread them out socially distancing.
Yeah, I think there's got to be a plan in place for people with disabilities, some kind of a priority, a procedure, because we're going to be left out. You know, when people start getting on, you know, maybe in October time frame, I don't want to be standing on the platform and left as the crowd rushes in, and then when I get on, there's no seats, or you know, the inside is not kind of the way it should be in terms of too many people on it. I don't mean this is just I mean this could be a senior citizen issue too, because they can't move as fast.
No, I think what I did see, I can honestly say, um, over the weekend, especially on rail, because that's where I rode. The majority of people were wearing masks and doing what is required. Um, but the issue is, I saw a text from somebody that says, "Well, families are not required to socially distance." The problem is, how do we know if they're a family? We don't know. That's the problem. From an agency standpoint, it's extremely difficult for us to try and enforce something like that. And what we're hearing from our counterparts who are entered into multiple phases past where we are in North America, where European and Asian agencies are into phase two, or even further progressed, they realize now they can no longer do it. And
I think,
go ahead.
Joe, if I may add to that, I think the Barbara, I believe was your name. You're bringing up an excellent point that I think what we are focusing on trying to do is help riders make informed choices, so they understand what is the service that we're running. They have realistic expectations that we cannot assure or guarantee that they will be socially distant, but to enable them to make informed choices about when to ride and where to board. I hear your point about the visually impaired community, and we will take that back to the ERT, our executive response team, to look more closely at that particular group of riders and how we could help them make informed choices about when or where to board.
Thank you so much. Was on.
This is Pat Sheehan. Am I off mute?
Okay, thank you.
Yep, we can hear you, Pat. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. That was a very good presentation. I appreciate it. I think Phil, maybe AAC might appreciate a presentation on this topic too, but that's for you to decide. My question is, part of what I am involved in, or at least reacting to, is I work for Department of Veterans Affairs. I know my agency at 810 Vermont, 811 Vermont is looking to do, they're looking to reopen at some point. But with you've got a lot of people coming in from Virginia. I've got a lot of my staff that comes in who are disabled, coming in from Maryland. And so knowing what the capacity of the system is going to be, and I thought the 20% was an interesting number, I think is a factor that needs to be part of the decision that my leadership needs. So my question is, the presentation that we're putting together here, or that you have given here, I'd like to be able to share that with them, either the slides or also the video or YouTube. That'll be made available for us.
Yes, Pat, this is John. The YouTube video will be up when the meeting finishes, and I can email you the slides, or they're already on the website, but I'll get them to you.
Beautiful, John. Thank you, John. This is well done, and there was a lot of good information that I think people within the federal government would want to know.
Yeah, Pat, if I could just mention, I'm sure Laura covered it in her talking points, and I apologize I missed part of the meeting. But we are working very much not only with our federal partners, OMB. We had a meeting with to go over what our capabilities are in the next few months. We are also working with the jurisdictions, as well as Lynn Bowersox and her group are bringing in our customers, trying to get their perspective of when they think their employers will bring them back to work. So that can help us guide when we make these decisions on when we need to ramp up service or do something else. So I think your point is well taken. The more that we can communicate with one another and make sure that we understand what everybody else is thinking and what moves they're about to make, it will make us provide a better service that the region needs.
Beautiful. Yeah, I agree. Thank you.
All right, so I know that Yvette's been waiting to ask a question, so I'm going to give her the opportunity, and then this will be the last question because I think we do want to make sure we have time to move on to a budget update. Yvette? Yvette, if you're speaking, we cannot hear you. You might have to unmute yourself.
Yvette, it's on the bottom of the screen.
Sending her a message. She chatted me saying that she had a question, so.
The mute button, it's on the bottom of the screen, Yvette. The mute button looks like a microphone. So can you can hover your mouse over it.
All right, we're going to move on. Yvette, if you can type in your question into the chat, perhaps we can address it that way. In the meantime, John, do you want to take us on to a budget update?
Sure. Can everyone hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Hold on one sec. I just need to advance slides. Really, this is just a quickie. Since the last time we met, or the RAC met in March, the board was still considering the FY 2021 budget. And I just wanted to go over what was approved in early April in terms of fare and service changes, and then what will happen to those now that this pandemic has hit. So just really the highlights in terms of fare changes. They did approve an increase in the peak fare, anywhere from 10 to 50 cents. So the max fare during peak periods goes up to $6.50. There was no increase in off-peak fares. They did approve $2 weekend flat fare. The bus rail transfer discount goes from 50 cents to $1, not to the full $2, as was initially proposed in the GM's budget. There is not a cash surcharge on Metrobus, so people paying cash or people reloading their smart trip cards won't be charged that extra quarter. And they've simplified the way that Metro calculates the distance-based peak and off-peak fares, which, and then in terms of service changes, the board did approve later Metro Rail service hours until midnight during the week, 2 a.m. Friday and Saturday nights. Sunday hours would stay the same. There was approval of weekend service increases on Metrobus and Metro Extra service increase on some Metro Extra routes. there was a approval of an increase in service generally by 1 train an hour on Sunday to match Saturday schedules. Sunday opening and close would stay the same, but there would be more trains every hour. The bus service that was put in place, the Lifeline service that was put in place when we cut back Metro Rail hours, would be reduced when we go back to staying open until 2 a.m. on Fridays and Saturdays. There were a few bus routes that were eliminated, 4 out of all the proposals that are listed here, 2 in Montgomery County, the Z's. The 5A, once the Silver Line Phase 2 opens out to the airport. And then finally, the TAGS, which is a shuttle bus in Springfield that I believe Fairfax County will be taking over. And then the last service change was Metro would widen the headways from, I think, 8 to 12 minutes between 5 and 6 in the morning on weekdays. And just since last month's or March meeting is fresh in the mind, peak fares would be charged from 5 to 6 a.m. All that said, we are now in a pandemic, and we're not, as Joe mentioned, we're not able to offer this service now. So the board, at its meeting at the end of May, deferred all of these changes for at least 6 months, so until at least January 1st. So this is sort of looking back as to what happened to the FY 2021 budget, and just to let you all know that even though these changes have been approved, obviously because we're in, the response and stabilization phase, that these changes won't be implemented for at least 6 months.
Thank you, John. Is there anything else?
Not unless anyone has any questions.
I'm sure they do. Folks have questions for John?
John, a question from Catherine. How is the CARES money holding up for y'all?
As I understand it, it will to balance our FY 20 and 21 budgets, but I'd have to, before I say anything more definitive than that, I would have to, I'd have to do some more research. So I can ask and get back to you, but I think so far so good.
Just to clarify for anybody on the phone for whom that acronym does not resonate, that is one of the congressional packages, COVID-19 relief packages that was passed that provided money to transportation systems, among other things.
It is also allowing us to decrease some of the subsidy payments that we're receiving from our local government partners, since obviously local governments are hurting for money as well.
And do I remember that WMATA, well, not necessarily WMATA, but that the DC region's share of that money, it was $25 billion to transit agencies around the country, and WMATA got, sorry, not in WMATA, the DC area got approximately 1 of those 25 billion?
I will double check. I thought it was a little bit higher, but
other questions for John on the budget and sort of the board's decision making around deferring some of these changes?
Colin, I had one.
Go for it, Andrew.
Thank you. Hi, this is Andrew Keurig, by the way. So there were actually 2 things. Is Laura still on here? Because this would be a good question that she could maybe answer too.
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, great. Thank you, Laura. There were 2 things that came up at the last budget last board meeting. One of which was the new PIDs that you all would be rolling out and the customer service projects that were mentioned in our previous discussions of the FY21 budget. I assume those are still happening, and if so, when will we be able to see a mock-up or a demo version? PIDs, to be clear, is the train arrival time boards on the platforms.
I'll have to get back to you on the mock-up. I mean, we have the new PIDs that have been installed in the 6 stations south of National Airport.
Right.
And it is that same design that is being installed now in the Platform 2 project for the Orange Line stations, Vienna, Dunloring,
Right.
East and West Falls Church.
Right.
If you have a more specific question about the RAC visiting a mock-up, I can get back to you.
Well, I guess maybe a good follow-up to your response would be, one thing I consistently heard from riders down in Alexandria is that the placement of the new PIDs on the platforms was, the sight lines were very poor, and so you could only see it from a third or half of the platform. I'm thinking specifically here, for example, of King Street. Yeah, I guess, have you all been looking into that? I beg your pardon. Or how have you been evaluating where to place them? I'm a Virginia Square to Vienna person myself, so yeah, I'm waiting with bated breath to see how it turns out my way.
I know that the team does look at sightlines for all of the components that we install. I'm not sure the specifics at King Street that made them turn out to be poor in riders' opinions, but I do believe we are constrained to some extent by structural limitations, but also by our CCTV and other security features. So we try and place the PIDs in the best position possible. I do believe that the team, prior to finalizing the design of Platform 2, incorporated all the feedback we had received on Platform 1, which would have included placement.
Okay. And then one final thing to pick up that I didn't get to get this in during the previous discussion, but one thing that riders especially have been tweeting me about is they will get to stations at 8:15 or 8:20 and they will have already missed the last train for the evening. I've noticed that the last train times on the website, last time I checked, had not been updated. Will those be updated to reflect current closing times?
I will take that feedback back to our digital team and get the information updated.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, I think that's an action item we need. Thank you.
Other questions on budget-related items? All right, hearing none. Did Yvette ever figure out her unmute situation?
I don't see Yvette anymore.
Okay. All right. Well, we can follow up with her and you know, try to get her question. I'm sure that we can get that over to Laura and Joe via email if necessary. Okay. So given that we've closed out those 2 agenda items, I'm not sure we need to keep Laura and Joe any longer unless they want to hang around, which they're certainly welcome to. But we do appreciate you all taking the time to give us those updates today. So I guess we did hear, you know, Andrew's request for. Oh.
I just want to say thank you very much for the time to present. I know Laura did most of it, and just everybody be safe. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Joe. So I did hear, you know, Andrew's suggestion that we try to tackle elections if we have time. Looking at the clock, we've got less than 20 minutes available to us. I am happy to try to, address that. But, I would also, say that if we think that's going to be, a lengthier engagement, that we could, at least spend some time over the next few minutes talking about who may want to step up into leadership roles, including the chair position and co-chair positions. We can kind of go from there and do the formal election process during our next meeting if we don't have time. So with that said, are there thoughts or preferences on how we handle this?
I have a question. We don't have our little nameplates, so I was just curious, to John or anyone, are we going to get new members before the election or like after the election? Or I remember having some sort of conversation at our last in-person meeting where everyone agreed who we were going to vote for. Wasn't it already like Will and Andrew, we're going to keep going in the leadership roles? Didn't we decide that? I thought we did. Or like, do we have to renominate y'all? Anyway, all right, I'll stop talking, but that was my thought.
Rebecca, I can actually, I'd mention the new members. I've been encouraging some folks, especially Virginians, since I am the last of the Virginians.
This is Rico. I'm just wondering, how do you become a board member?
A RAC member?
A board member?
They'd have to be nominated by the jurisdictions.
It is a RAC member. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. There's an application on WMATA's website, WMATA.com / I believe it's RAC. Wait.
This is John. I can email him the link to fill out.
Great. Okay.
That seems much more efficient.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah.
Hey, that sounds great.
Thank you, John.
Brittany, Rico, we really want you to apply.
I will. I'll do it.
I have been
Asking, wondering what the process is like.
Awesome.
I have been talking to some people here in Arlington and further afield, out in actually Loudon. So
This is Rico. I do actually have another question. I'm wondering about the fair and if we're going to be able to figure out a way to use credit cards.
What does he mean?
I think the question is
with the credit card
related
system.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Colin, you cut out there for a second.
We're having a little technical thing here, trying to see all the signs, so it'll be just a second.
Okay.
Hi, this is Anne. I'm just a member of the public. Can you end the screen share on the YouTube video?
I'm sorry, what was that?
Can you take the PowerPoint off of the YouTube video so that we can see faces?
Sure. This is John. I just did. The YouTube is a couple seconds behind, so hopefully it will disappear as we say momentarily.
Yep, you came through. Thank you so much.
Rico's going to actually email in his question because we're having a little video feed blurrage happening. We just can't really see his whole question. Okay.
No problem.
Thank you.
Great. Just ask him to send it my way.
Okay, Andrew, do you want to jump back into election-related things or new member?
Oh, yeah, I was just gonna say I've been encouraging some folks in Virginia, especially, like I said, I'm the last one. And so, you know, we'll see how that works out. But I hope a couple people apply at least. So.
John, did you ever get any applications that have been found to be legitimate?
A few. I will say, I guess to answer your question, Rebecca, whether or not the board meets tomorrow for June. So we won't have new appointees this month, but I have gotten some more interest from board members. Everything went a little obviously sideways in March and April. I have gotten some interest from board members in terms of moving forward with appointments. So I'm hopeful that I'll be able to do that by July, now that the RAC is back meeting and the board is pushing in that direction. So, I don't know. I'm sorry. I just want to look at my at the calendar. I don't think your meeting is messed up by July 4th, but
it's not, John. I already looked.
the 1st. Okay. But it's the 10th now. I may actually have a better idea of. I should have a better idea of candidates by July 1st when you all meet. I think the board is interested in ensuring that equity and diversity go into the selection process. And so what I can't say right now is whether or not the applicants that we have on file will match what I've sort of heard from the board in terms of what they're looking for in terms of RAC membership. So it's a long way of saying there is more interest. There's greater interest on the board to make sure that these vacancies get filled soon, and I just need to sort of have those with making sure that the applications we have on file or we will have on file are representative of the DC region,
the ridership,
and our ridership, and if not, then we or Metro sort of needs to go back to the well and do some targeted outreach. So I guess I don't know if we're at that next step is what I'm saying, if that makes any sense.
I think that makes perfect sense. And I would argue that we should err on the side of on the side of equity over expediency.
We've been waiting this long, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Can you refresh our memory, John? How many spots are up?
So there are 3 straight up vacancies. And then I know that there should be 2 or 3 more folks whose terms have expired at the end of in 2019. I think Catherine and Colin and maybe Rob.
I think that's right.
Okay.
Didn't Rob just join?
Yes, but he
How
filled
can he
in.
be up for expiration?
They gave me a 1-year probationary period.
Rude.
So
you already have to repledge.
So 3 vacancies and 3 folks whose terms have expired. And then there's the other 5 of you whose terms are.
This is Rico. I'm wondering how many Vacancies. Mute, my dear. Nobody can hear you. Oh, they can hear me. I'm wondering how many vacancies there are for DC.
Right now, I think one vacancy, well, two total, one vacancy and one that is filled by a member whose term expired and the board has not done reappointments.
So the answer is 1 or 2?
Click on the
Yes, I mean, so there's one totally vacant spot specifically assigned to DC, and then there's one spot that could be reappointed.
Great. So for those of you watching on YouTube, like and subscribe, and also apply to become a member of the RAC.
John, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Thanks. I'm sorry, I missed your last statistics. How many were, what did we have? How many, who was retiring and who was?
So we have 3 vacant, like totally vacant spots that had been filled by Lorraine,
Valerie?
Valerie, and Clarence, Jay Clarence.
Right, okay.
And then there are 3 people whose terms technically ended in December of 2019 on the RAC.
They can reapply, right?
They can reapply. Catherine Collin Robb.
Oh, well, of course they'll reapply. Okay, good.
I'm putting words in no one's mouth.
Yeah, Rob has to reapply. That's just a given. Okay, moving on.
Do we, John, are there term limits on the RAC?
Yes.
Yes, but they're long, like 8 years. I don't think anybody's in danger.
This guy barely had 6 months of service.
I've had 15.
I'm still figuring this out.
Yeah, I remember because Rob and I, our first meeting was March of 19. Babies, Rebecca.
So we've got just a few minutes left here. I'm going to recommend that we tackle elections, proper during our next meeting. That said, it would be great to hear folks who are interested in being in those leadership roles express that interest if they want to at this moment. Just to give anyone on the RAC a sense for who may be willing to step up.
And would we be voting via email, so we have a secret ballot, or we care?
I don't know about that. I mean,
I think we ever had secret ballots.
I don't think that's necessary.
Last year you had to railroad Colin into being chair, so I believe it was you specifically, Rebecca.
Sorry.
Give cards.
That wasn't exactly a heated race.
Okay.
Just to let you all know, I'll obviously be sort of going back to find a better platform to run this meeting, since I don't think we want to do WebEx again. And so there may be opportunities if we use Zoom. I'm not particularly familiar with Zoom, but there may be opportunities if people want to do a secret ballot, depending on where we are in July, that they can chat me or something. But we'll cross that bridge.
Good.
Could I renominate Colin for chair?
Nope.
Is that a refusal or is that a joke? Because I'm laughing on the inside.
It's a refusal. I mean, okay. I am honored, but I decline. Thank you.
Got it.
not because I don't love you all and not because I don't enjoy this, but because I do feel as though, you know, I just am not doing the position justice in terms of the amount of energy that it requires.
Does anybody think we should stay elections until we have new members, or is that unfeasible, or is that even a word?
Feasible is a word.
Thank you.
Infeasible.
Infeasible.
Oh,
Right.
yeah.
Inappropriate. Is it
I think they're
possible
both
to
words.
stay the elections until we have new members, or is that not legit?
I mean, I think at this point we're sort of operating in a, you know, uncharted territory. You know, the bylaws, I don't know that they account for that. I mean, we were supposed to have done elections in April, according to the bylaws. So.
This is Rico. I am wondering how long that application process takes.
John?
I would say at this point, I would expect the board to make appointments at the end of July. So however long that is from now, 6 to 7 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And if I could just add on to, if I could just respond to Rebecca's comment, I don't think there's a huge problem bylaws wise with deferring elections until their appointments. But also, given that the RAC missed its April and May meetings, and that we're meeting virtually, so perhaps it's a lower bar to entry in terms of attending a meeting. I'm not on video, you didn't see me do air quotes, but that the RAC may be able to, if you all are interested or willing, and if it works, to hold a meeting in August. Since really ain't nobody going on vacation anyway. You know, and if that would be an appropriate time to do elections, depending on where the chips fall between now and the July meeting with appointments.
Mm-hmm.
John, am I off mute? This is Pat.
Loud and clear, Pat.
Thank you, sir. Colin, you left me in a little bit of a cliffhanger. You said I'm going to be going to start back, and then I lost all connection.
I'm sorry, what was the last thing you heard?
We're going to go back to something, and then I dropped for the next 2-3 minutes or whatever. Came back to when John was.
I'm not sure what I was talking about.
Colin was admitting that he's not going to seek another leadership role.
That's not acceptable.
Is
that what you said, Colin? Where you were going with your remarks? Okay.
I mean, I did say that at one point, yes.
Oh, okay. I didn't know. And that's what I wanted to clarify. Okay.
This is Rico. I'm just wondering if we're planning to use Zoom for the next meeting.
This is John. I'm going to say probably. I will double check. I need to do some quick study on Zoom, but I think yes, if WebEx presents these accessibility concerns,
John,
then I will be talking with the AAC staff.
Yeah, Anua's been running very good meetings, so she's got it down pretty good. Yeah.
So.
Great. And we will strive to use Zoom for the next meeting. All right. So we are. Go ahead, John.
No, Colin, I was going to say, if no one else especially wants to do it, and probably against the advice of medical professionals, given everything else I have going, I would chair it if no one else really wants it.
We could vote
right now. Well, there you go, folks. You've got one candidate, and it sounds like we've got some time for other folks to step up for other leadership positions.
May I suggest Will, and if you don't want to be DC vice chair, then maybe or co-chair, then Maybe Rob?
If I'm at large, can I be a DC chair? I don't know.
I mean, Colin was at large.
DC resident.
Yes, it just depends on where you hang your hat at night.
That would be DC. Yeah, I'm open to it.
Well, I do want to be respectful of everyone's time. We are at time. So those of you who have just been recommended to consider leadership positions, I'll let you noodle on that in the interim. Feel free to reach out to me with any questions. I'll do my best to answer them. And also let me know, in the interim, if you have any items that you want to make sure we have on the agenda for next month's meeting.
One thing more. Just want to say one thing before everyone abandons. We have had more public comment today, more participation by public members today on this ridiculously inaccessible electronic video call than we have in the last several in-person meetings. So I really think that this shows that people are interested in what the RAC is working on. And so I'm excited that at least during the pandemic, folks who maybe wanted to get involved earlier are able to log in, and that hopefully that we can continue that through Zoom in a better way.
We've seen the exact same thing at AAC, even for our subcommittee meetings, 40 plus with the regular meeting, 30 plus with the subcommittee meetings. Yeah,
wow, that's amazing.
It really is.
And thank you, Rico, for joining us. I'm sorry for all technological issues.
Thanks, everyone. Stay safe.
Hey, you know what? It's no problem. Thank you.
Good night, you all.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.